Mojo Projo donated on Patreon at the Mythic tier for an entire year and sponsors today's video. So I think we're best to start getting the energy going at this point. Play the Guide of Souls. Good to get these creatures into play before we drop our commander as well, because obviously we want something to be able to point Satya at when it comes into play. Skullbriar, the Walking Grave. You forget which creatures are elementals, but that's a really good commander of its own right. Sidisi Brood Tyrant, the first commander to hit play. Okay, so we kind of need to get into a land here really, otherwise we're held off on the Satya again. We could always start removing things with the Aerial Extortionist and clear the way for next turn. So yeah, sacrificing the zombie with Zamon and Dina, and drains the elemental player for 2 life. Did not get to play another land though, so he's quite a ways away from controlling the 8 lands he needs to abuse this thing. Alright, not a land. We do get a really good piece of new removal though in Static Prison. So we could get that down along with the Aerial Extortionist and then slam down the commander next turn. Potentially playing into a board wipe, but we've got the Combustible Gear Hulk and a wheel on the way as well, so we'll try our luck here. So get another energy. Aerial Extortionist. We'll go after the Omnath with that, because I don't think... Oh, wow, really? I was going to put a Static Prison onto the Sidisi, because I don't think they'd put Sidisi underneath that. Alright, well, we get to clear our opponent's board for the most part here anyway, unless he wants to scoop as well. Might be encouraging my opponent to wipe the board here, but we'll play it the way we were going to. Static Prison's going to have to go after the Skullbriar because Animar has protection from white. So we will leave it at that. And once again, the Midnight Clock has been very much slowed down. Not going to swing in. We'll be able to swing in with Aerial Extortionist and get an ETB on the token that enters with our commander. We've got 4 energy at the moment. We'll get 2 from our commander. Another one from our commander entering to this and the token entering to this. So we'll actually be able to keep a copy of the Aerial Extortionist if we want to, which should nicely control our opponent's board. But like I said, that does encourage them into a board wipe. Well, so much for that. A Legions to Ashes, exile a non-land permanent an opponent controls. And that actually would have been handy against this deck actually. All the tokens with the same name. Never got to see the tokens unfortunately. I don't mind copying Solemn Simulacrum though. If Animar gets too much out of hand, we can always steal it away with this. It doesn't have protection from blue, thankfully. Okay, a Great Train Heist, the only means of extra combats outside of a creature. Yeah, I think we have to pay an energy into the Static Prison. So we've only got 3 at the moment, but get our commander out for the first time. Get another energy from the Guide of Souls. This is a really good spell sister that I tend to forget about personally because it's reasonably new. I don't think it was new with Modern Horizons 3, I think it was printed before that, wasn't it? But yeah, one to remember I think. Go through to attacks, and even if they're able to block with the Animar by getting a flash creature down, I don't think we really need to worry here. We've got decent toughness. So Guide of Souls, whenever you attack you can pay 3 energy. Don't think we're going to bother with that, just want to hoard our energy at the moment. Might have been an idea to make a copy of the Guide of Souls so that we can really ramp up the energy, and we could have paid 1 energy quite easily into keeping a copy of it, but I like the idea of having a bit more mana. We've missed land drops for a few times now, a few turns. So copy the Solemn Simulacrum with our commander. I'll just generically go after an island, and the token did enter, so Guide of Souls is going to give us another energy and a life. Oh, actually, it's a flying counter. You know what? I'm going to say yes to this. Glad I double checked that. It's 2+ counters, which is nice, but I thought it was flying until the end of the turn. So we'll pay the energy, put that on our commander so it'll be easier to swing in with it for the foreseeable until it gets removed again. Might be our opponent gets down a flyer anyway, or it'd have to be a couple of flyers thanks to the menace. But yeah. A flying counter, menace and haste at the moment. Nothing else to do with this mana. We could feign some counter magic, but don't think we're taking this game particularly seriously after the scoops, so just get down the battle horns, and if we've got a spare mana next turn we'll equip it onto the commander. Not going to pay 4 energy to keep a Solemn Simulacrum. I'd rather take the card draw here. because you do sacrifice the creature, you do not exile it. So Solemn draws us a card. And there's another half decent target to ramp up the energy. That is 3 energy when it enters. A Vespelark, another evoke creature. Return a creature with power 1 or less from graveyard to battlefield. They don't have one at the moment. The Skullbriar is in exile. But they did manage to get a flyer down, so the Menace and Vorak Battlehorns might be relevant. And yeah, an Ancient Green Warden, so flying and reach will do it. So I'm glad I got the equipment down now. I can play lands from the graveyard thanks to the Ancient Green Warden. And obviously the Animar is kind of keeping them in this because they don't have too much in the ways of mana, but kind of ramping ahead quite nicely with the Animar making the generic cost less. Playing and cracking a Scalding Tarn from the graveyard. Alright, don't mind seeing the shock land. We're gaining a nice chunk of life from the Soul Sister anyway. We will keep the Skullbriar in exile, I think. So we're back down to 3 energy. It's interesting, I've never played an energy deck because I don't think we've ever had enough cards to really make one relevant. To make a commander deck relevant, that is. Shock down the Sacred Foundry. So yeah, it's interesting to see the management of the energy and how well we can manage that. So we want the Combustible Gearhulk, I think would be good to get a copy of. Can start swinging in with that. Do we care about anything else in hand? Because we're about to shuffle everything away. Don't suppose there's much point in Combustible Gearhulk then. Do we just want to hoard energy? We could equip, go for this, get an extra combat, and throw this into play. Suppose that would be alright. So we can get a copy of Solemn and a copy of the Guide of Souls, I think. So yeah, we'll go through to the attack phase. Swing in at our opponent, which triggers the commander. Guide of Souls going to trigger again because we've got energy, but not going to make use of it. Satya pointed at the Guide of Souls first because we want to maximise the number of creatures that these see. So that comes into play. Although I suppose they can always block it with the Ancient Green Warden, can't they? I forgot that it comes in attacking. Oh well. Let's go for the Great Train Heist now. If we had an extra mana we could go for the treasure thing, but whatever. Just 4 mana. And we're probably going to lose out on the Guide of Souls, but we get more energy when it enters at least. Alright, so trying to block our Satya is forgetting about the Menace and the equipment here. And the Ancient Green Warden. Obvious block on that. Alright, so we've landed 10 commander damage on our opponent at the moment, so maybe something like this, putting plus counters on our commander might be of some relevance. Beginning of combat, we'll just make a Solemn Simulacrum this time, like we should have done previously. Or we could always have got down the Electrostatic Pummeler and just made more energy. So remembering that the Solemn Simulacrum enters attacking now, we're not bothered if our opponent blocks or not, because we get the card draw either way. Get another energy and another life. We are 1 below our starting life total, and this time allowing Solemn Simulacrum through for whatever reason. So we get a free 2 points of damage there. Get down the Pummeler before we shuffle our hand on the next turn. So that's going to leave us with 13 energy. So we could keep the Solemn Simulacrum here, but like I said, I'd rather... Or actually, yeah, I say I'd rather take the draw, but we're going to shuffle whatever we draw into away anyhow. Let's just see what it was out of curiosity. Never know, our opponent might remove the Midnight Clock in response. So we might as well draw. And there's an Ottawara. Can't remember if we made a land last turn, I don't think we did. Could have used that to bounce the Animar though. So the 12th counter goes on to the Midnight Clock. Eventually by turn 8, getting there with that. And shuffled everything away. Skull Clamp is really good, especially on a Solemn that's about to be sacrificed. Got back into the Combustible Gearhulk anyway. Sword of the Animist we mentioned previously. And I'd love to see a Roaming Throne, especially multiple copies of it. Probably name Human with that as opposed to Artificer. Our opponent's life total isn't great here, so I was just going to say I hope he doesn't scoop, but yeah, this will just be a bonus episode I think. If you've seen this video, then just know that I very much struggled to get content this week because this keeps happening. Hopefully you all got some enjoyment from Satya anyway, and hopefully you've seen a better game with this commander before now. Life's tough on Magic Online. Satya Aetherflux Genius versus Edgar Markov, Losheel and Iroas. One lander, obvious mulligan. into a 2-lander with an Arcane Signet isn't great. We're not really doing anything else with that hand either. I mean, even if we can get into our commander, we're not really copying anything. It's too reliant on top deck, so I'll mulligan that as well. We'll go down a card here. Alright, Rhystic Study. Yeah, Roaming Throne might make that good on its own. Keep this. Got a couple of Surveyor lands I don't mind seeing either. So we'll try and keep the Stone Idol. And we'll get rid of the plains here. And just hope that we draw into some more lands. I just got off to a decent start in a game with this Satya list and had 2 opponents scoop on us and then another opponent that stuck it out for longer but just ended up scooping before we did anything particularly interesting, so that's always fun. Prying Blade from the Elephant player. A turn 1 Sol Ring for Edgar Markov. Alright, there's the 4th land and we even get an energy off that one. So it's going to be 2 Surveyor lands in a row here, I imagine. A Combustible Gear Hulk. I don't imagine we're going to have the mana for. That's a good means of card draw though. Could even name Construct with the Roaming Throne if we like. Although making 2 Combustible Gear Hulks naming Human. Let's keep that on top. Rhystic Study will hopefully draw us into the mana for it. Felwar Stone for the Boros player. And we see a turn 2 Felidar Retreat for the Vampire player. Probably to just get plus counters and vigilance. We know what we're drawing into. We'll try and put some acceleration on top of our library, hopefully, or at least get a bit closer to it. Bloodstained Mire, I don't think we can say no to a land, really. Put that on top. And Impakal is a scary one. Haven't seen too much of that since it released, but we're going to see some decent play from it here, I imagine. Got down a bounce land as well. The first commander is Losheel coming into play on turn 3. And then a land being played into the enchantment. Still missing red mana over here. But you would imagine he'd easily be able to get down vampires. The first creature, unusually, we see is a cat token. And not playing any vampires with 5 cards in hand, surprisingly. So we draw into that Bloodstained Mire. I'll just get down the Ether Hub for our first piece of energy. And we'll play our first spell on turn 3. Which is the Rhystic Study, of course. So, depending on what we draw into, it's probably Roaming Throne next turn. I don't imagine we can make enough energy straight away with the commander, but we'll be able to make some copies of it anyway, and then the turn after, maybe we can make enough copies to actually stick an extra Roaming Throne. And Impakal swings in straight away for its first plus counter and its first golem. We get the golem and the Impakal. Outpost Siege then being played into the Rhystic Study and they do pay the tax. The mono white player played a Blighted Step, so for 3 white sacrifice, gain 2 life for each creature you control. A Skittering Surveyor being played into the Rhystic Study, looks like the tax is going to be paid here as well. And this time Losheel is attacking and that's going in towards the cat token. A Fetch Land being played into the Felidar Retreat, and making another cat token, and this time putting plus counters and vigilance on the cats, so see which way they swing in here. Not swinging in at all, I mean they have vigilance, you might as well swing. Alright, another fetch for us, so not going to struggle on land drops here, are we? I'll just make it a plains. We've only got 2 Surveil lands in the deck, so we've played both of them. One of the fetches can be a Triome. Play the Roaming Throne, which is going to be more tax if our opponents want to point spot removal at our stuff. And yeah, let's name Human for our commander, and then we can get multiple Combustible Gear Hulks in, or whatever creature we point it at. Didn't look at what was named with this actually, it was Khan's name with this, so at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card and you can play it this turn. Exiling a Plains. Iroas got a victory with 2 mana held up, and we draw our first card from the Rhystic Study. Clearing yet another land off the top. Not shy on fetches here. Iroas being played into Rhystic Study as well, so we've got our 2 cards from it. It's not really the right way to think about it, but I do like drawing at least 2 cards with Rhystic Study to make it worth it. If you're making your opponents pay tax and play fewer spells in a turn, then, I mean, it does pay for itself straight away there as well. But I've got this idea of 3 mana equaling 2 cards on a typical blue spell. Anyway, Menace on an Impakal now, thanks to the Iroas. So a couple of golems are created, and we've got an Impercarl and the Golem token coming in towards us. In fact, everything is coming in at us. So the Boros player is starting to become a threat for Losheel, turning into the left quite aggressively, so could signify a board wipe. I wouldn't have thought he'd want to board wipe so soon after playing his own commander. You'd assume he's going to get a blocker or two into play though. Not even equipping the Prying Blade. Alright, does get a decent blocker into play. Another ward creature, Bronze Guardian. Cannot afford the Rhystic Study tax. Gets us into our first means of generating energy. Electrostatic Pummeler does it on entry. Once again, looks like Edgar Markov's just held on to a bunch of lands. He did get down his red mana previously with Survive Triome, but it's plus counters on the cats once again. Well, attacks have been spread around a bit at least. The cats dealing 8 damage, or actually it'll only be 4 damage to the white player, because there's a blocker here that he might be forgetting about. Alright, decides not to risk the block and goes down to 32 there. Casting the first vampire, Florian, Voldaren, Scion. So could have had more plus counters on more creatures here, but playing it in a different manner here. So we see the first Symphony of the Night token. And we just drew into Royal Cartographer. When a land enters, you get an energy. So do we hold off on getting down our commander? Await a board wipe? There's a Terror of the Peaks as well. Yeah, for 5 mana we could get down the Royal Cartographer and the Electrostatic Pummeler. Yeah, I think I'll go for that actually. So we'll go for a fetch land, and this will have to be an untapped land, but we are going to trigger the Pummeler twice. And that's cool. On Magic Online now you've got yield to all energy generating abilities, so definitely click that, that's good. So we're up to 3 energy now, and we'll get 6 in total from the Pummeler. This puts us in a better position so that we can play out our commander and hopefully make use of Roaming Throne and get copies of that to keep. This all assumes that no one's going to go for a board wipe here though, but we're all playing into said board wipe, so I'm kind of not expecting one. More ramp from Iroas with an Arcane Signet. Nayali, Sun's Vanguard is a really good one. Attacking tokens are now going to have double strike, and they'll get some card advantage from them as well. We've got more blockers now, so yeah, it'd be interesting to see if they swing in towards us or not. Iroas has now been animated thanks to Devotion of 7. And no, Iroas is going to swing in at us. Our opponent's clearly had a bad interaction with Satya before now. But at least an Impercarl is going to go down the middle, the Golem's going into the right. So do we have to just take 7 damage here? Nayali triggering it for the first time. Whenever one or more tokens attack a player, exile the top card and you can play that card. Yeah, all the golems, including the ones that just entered, are going to the right. So hopefully Iroas is the arch enemy here. Doesn't look as though there are any blocks being made at the moment, so yeah, I don't want to lose out on the Royal Cartographer, but we do have to double block, so yeah, just taking the damage annoyingly. So we go down to 23, 28 for the mono white player, 25 for the Mardu player. Tempered Steel, a pet card of mine. I don't often get to play it in any decks, but +2/+2 on artifact creatures. We draw again with the enchantment. Gets us into, is it Genitorium? Or is it Generatorium? Yeah, we just need the mana to go with all this stuff and a bit more time to actually play it. I suppose we can get down our commander and the Generatorium next turn. And now here comes the swing back on the Boros player, so that's a 2/4 commander, a 3/4 with Ward 2, and a 5/7 with double strike, and has made absolutely no use of this Prying Blade yet. I'm sure there's a version of this that makes treasure and it's one to play, one to equip, although maybe it's red. Can't remember if there's a colourless version of it that costs less. So that has our opponent go down to 22 with 4 cards in hand, and may well get a swing back from the vampire player yet. Edgar Markov is doing something at the end of the turn. Urge to Feed is -3/-3. Pointing that at the Nayali, which is a means of obviously generating card advantage for them, as well as double strike on these things. Putting plus counters on the Florian and the token as well with that, so I don't know, maybe there's a kind of plus counter sub-theme. I know some of the vampires do that anyway.
Just an update on Lucy for everybody that's watching.
Alright, an update on Lucy, yeah?
and you'll see a video in a minute.
Right, okay. So
That's what he does when he hears you doing these videos. You'll understand.
Well, yeah, even I'm not seeing it now, so this doesn't... We're all in the dark here.
Well, you'll understand when
but
you see the video.
Right, so Lucifer does something when I'm recording videos, and it's... Yeah, okay, right.
Okay.
Look forward to that.
Yes. And so you should.
So, as you expect, there's actually no vigilance on these things now, so it's a bit of a risk swinging in, but that is 4, 8, 12 damage going into the left, and absolutely no blockers for the Boros player, so yeah, arguably being far too aggressive here. He's going to plummet down to 10, and he's got our attack to survive yet. At least this is going to encourage him to hold back blockers, as opposed to bashing us all for a bunch of damage. So now Florian gets to look at a card. Look at the top X cards, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. And one of them is going to go into hand. Or actually it stays in exile, but they can play it from exile if they like. Okay, can't see anything in the exile zone, so they had 4 cards in hand previously, I think. They just went for an Evolving Wilds there. And managed to get into another cat token, and then it was more plus counters, because obviously Evolving Wilds is landfall twice. Now, see what we can do here. Yet another fetch. We're going to end up with every single fetch in the deck if we're not careful. So I think is it Generatorium first, and then play our commander? And we're even going to get to draw a card from the Generatorium, I imagine. We're on 6 energy already. Let's just play a fetch. That can be a plateau for us. And we get 2 energy on landfall now. So 8 on the Marsh Flats, and then when the plateau enters we'll go up to 10. At which point we get down our commander. And the Boros player is holding up priority here, so might be that we don't get to swing in with Satya. But we'll go straight through to combat and attempt it. So swing in to the left. Want to hold back some blockers just in case we're desperate. So we get 2 triggers with the commander. And how does keeping 2 copies of Roaming Throne sound? I mean, we've got the energy for it now. So we're going to get 3 energy from every trigger with our commander. We could name Merfolk. Let's go for Human. Do we just go for Human twice? I'm just going to knock the Boros player out of the game as well, because he's been quite aggressive towards us this game. And yeah, let's name Human again for the Satya, so we're just getting triggers all over the place. So we end up with 16 energy. We only need 8. So we get to keep half of our energy. And we're getting our opponent down to 11 here, thanks to the blocker being kept out of play previously by the Vampire deck. But you can imagine, if we get to keep this board state, we might just win next turn, because, as in so many games previously, Terror of the Peaks just goes off. So we'll get our commander triggering once from itself, and then an additional 3 times from the Roaming Throne. So there we go, get rid of that player. And we don't even have to discard down to hand size here. I think it's going to be more fun to go for the Combustible Gear Hulk. So, depending on what our opponents do, if we get to keep this board state, I might just go for the more fun play, because it's not often that we actually get a full game with Satya. Alright, well, there's a Swords to Plowshares. So, Roaming Throne, is that how Ward works? It should still only trigger once, because it's just this copy that's triggering. Yeah, I'm not sure we should get 3 triggers of the ward. Maybe we should. They're not going to get the Swords to Plowshares through here anyway. Heuristic Study might not draw as a card though. But Ward so often catches players out, it's caught me out before. Why Roaming Throne has Ward 2 is anyone's guess. But I'm really praying that we don't see a Shame Scoop here. Pays for Study. Oh, I suppose it is working correctly, isn't it? Because this is a human. That's why it's working that way. So it is the Roaming Throne itself that's triggering. But because it's a human, the other 2 Roaming Thrones see the trigger and add an additional 2 onto it, so we've given all of our Roaming Thrones super ward, basically. So it's board wipe or nothing at this point. Maybe could have waited. If our opponent had been a bit more patient, he could have waited for us to pay the energy on this. For all he knows, we're not going to pay it. And then he would have been able to afford the ward, but luckily for him, we were always going to pay into these and keep hold of them. I wasn't sure how much energy we'd be able to store in this deck, and didn't actually account for the fact that we'd be keeping hold of the tokens, to be honest, but I mean, the fact that we do keep hold of them is really, really good. Is it Generatorium? Draws us a card because we've now paid energy and clearing yet another land off the top. So I think we can just throw the shock land away here. We do now have Metalcraft for something like Inventor's Fair as well. And it looks as though the mono white player is going straight through to combat again. If we get a big hitter in towards us, I'll probably just chump it with the Electrostatic Pummeler, because we're getting a nice amount of energy from the Cartographer. 3-4 to the right, and we get the double striker as we assumed we would. So we will throw away the construct here, and no point double blocking with this because combat damage is not dealt to attacking artifact creatures while Losheel is in play. 6 cards in hand and hasn't spent any mana yet though. A Chief of the Foundry, playing that after combat, curiously, but he didn't get through anyway, so it didn't really matter. Drew a card off that entering with his commander as well. And still holding up that 3 mana, has not once made use of this Prying Blade yet. See if we take a big hit from the Vampire player. Might be that we have to make some unfortunate blocks here. Yep, coming in towards us. So how much is this? 15, 16, 17, 18. They don't have a land to crack. Maybe we do just have to go for the Terror of the Peaks play. So could we just take a hit for 13 and give up on the Royal Cartographer? It's unfortunate, but I think that's okay. Gonna make a lot of energy just swinging in with our commander next turn. And obviously I want to maximise the number of roaming thrones we've got in play if I can. So we plummet down to 9. Florian still gets to look at a lot of cards here. And once again getting rid of a land, so just wants to play the Scry land. And makes a cat token with that with the Felidar Retreat. Can't believe the lack of vampires we've seen from this Edgar Markov list. It's a bit of a weird one. See if we can force a board wipe out of our opponent's hand. Yep, there it is, a Wrath of God. Was a long time coming, so apparently should have just blocked with the Roaming Throne, but we didn't know that our opponent had a board wipe. Alright, so that's our plan scuppered. Yet another land for us. So, yeah, I don't think anyone's going to let us draw with Combustible Gearhulk. We could get into more mana, like we're just dropping a land every turn, which is good, but absolutely no acceleration whatsoever this game. Our opponents still have a fair few cards in hand, so they could use spot removal on Terror of the Peaks, although we've already seen a Swords to Plowshares. Yeah, I think I'll try a Combustible Gearhulk, and we'll point that at the player with the highest life total. We're more likely to be given cards if he's not as worried about taking life, but I imagine he'll just give us the cards here. Might be that if we get into a Sol Ring or something, we can start gaining a little bit of life with Metalcraft on the Inventor's Fair. Alright, he did decide to take 8 life there, so it was a Guide of Souls, which is another means of life gain, unfortunately. Trumpeting Carnosaur's a good one to see the back of for our opponents, and a Wayfarer's Bauble. So I think we'll just play out the Inventor's Fair anyway. Argument to be made for us feigning having a Swords to Plowshares or something, but I think we can just pass at that and hope that our opponents don't mess with us too much more. The commander back out again. So looks as though Losheel has probably been slowed down quite nicely. Does not pay for the Rhystic Study, so gets us into a Generous Gift, which could be the difference between us dying and not. And there we see a Skull Clamp as well. So probably going on the commander. Welcoming Vampire, a means of card draw for our opponent, and makes a token with that. Okay, and then another Vampire, it's another flyer as well, Drana, the last Blood Chief, so yeah, I'm thinking we're going to need to get Terror of the Peaks down next turn, and you'll never guess what we just drew into. Rhystic Study doing some work for us, clearing all these lands off the top. A land being played into these to give them plus counters. So yeah, I think we are setting up something with our commander and a Terror of the Peaks after all. Just drew into Unstable Amulet. So yeah, I think we just get down a basic here. And then it's Terror of the Peaks. And like I said before, we'll hold up the Generous Gift. So we're obviously showing our opponents what we're doing here. And if they've got spot removal, then so be it. But not much of anything else we can do here, I don't think. Not going to swing in with the Gearhulk because I need it to be able to block the ground creatures. All those vampires might be swinging in towards us next turn. The Prime Blade, 8 turns later, is finally being equipped onto Losheel. And then deciding to pass through the turn with 4 cards in hand, so maybe looking to crack this, won't gain much life from it though. Another land being made unfortunately before combat, so it's going to make the Welcoming Vampire unable to be blocked by us because Terror of the Peaks has 4 toughness, and a Rite of Oblivion going to get our Terror of the Peaks out of the way anyway. So the Vampire player has played the long game on us. Make them pay for the Rhystic Study, which they likely will with all that surplus mana. They did sacrifice a Vampire in order to do that at least, but I can't see us surviving much longer with this onslaught. We did quite well to stabilise against the Boros player, but it was a collective effort. We will go for the Generous Gift so they can't swing in with Drana, and only swinging in with the Welcoming Vampire, so 4 damage dealt to us. This is where it's relevant that we're not cracking fetches, because we may only survive at 1 life at some point here. Okay, and just another land. I mean, we're just totally getting flooded here, so I can't feel too bad about not doing much of anything. We'll just get down our commander for the fun of it, and probably our opponent goes wide on us next turn. Is there anything else we can do? Could try our luck with an unstable amulet, I suppose. And if we're unlucky with that, then we can still play our commander anyway. So that enters, we get a couple of energy, or 3 energy, thanks to the Generatorium. So exile the top card of our library and see which land it is. It is an island, so we'll just play for the fun of it at this point. Get down our commander again. 1 damage to each opponent from our commander being played from the command zone, because obviously that is not from our hand. And this is where it's relevant as well that we haven't been able to ramp this game, because if we had, I suppose we could have tried our luck with the Combustible Gearhulk, see if we get any card advantage. And if we did, maybe we could have got into a board wipe or something, but there's just way too few an amount of mana, which is ironic with all the lands that we've been drawing. But it's acceleration we need as opposed to all these land drops. So we will swing down the middle, because we do have Menace on our commander. We'll get 3 energy, copy the Combustible Gearhulk. The Gearhulk with its first strike can go into the right, maybe they'll double block, can't see it, but you never know. See if the Vampire player wants to take any damage to us. We do have a single white mana, so maybe we draw into Swords or something. We could keep ourselves alive with a Swords to Plowshares. We will have a card draw from this as well if we decide to keep hold of the Gearhulk. That was Aurora Shifter and a Dockside Extortionist, so only taking 4 damage there. That was a risk though. They could have taken a lot more damage and then they would have been forced to make some blocks. But luck isn't on our side here. There was yet another land on top, by the way. So unfortunately we have to go through to the end step in order to pay the energy into the Combustible Gearhulk being kept. Although anything of relevance from the Izzet Generatorium is going to have to be an instant anyway. Pay 6 energy, we will. And then we draw. Nope, it is an Aerial Extortionist, something that we could definitely have made use of this turn. Although, yeah, once again, we couldn't have afforded to get down our commander and that, which is the problem with this deck if you don't get into your acceleration. So we will await our demise. I doubt Losheel is going to do anything to help us here. Something that's noteworthy with Combustible Gearhulk, it is this card that deals the damage, so if we could give all of our creatures lifelink with something like True Conviction, which might be worth having in the deck anyway, seeing as how we're attacking in. Yeah, maybe gaining life from things like Combustible Gearhulk and attacks is worth having the True Conviction in here for. It is something I often like putting in my white attacking based decks. We do still have more chances to draw a Swords to Plowshares off the Rhystic Study. Our opponents are paying for it though. Anyway, they cast a Workshop Assistant, draw a card when it enters from the Losheel, so 4 cards in hand. Would not mind a board wipe here. And if he has a board wipe, he might go for it just to trigger his own Skull Clamp. Alright, there we are. We're still in the game then. And Urza's Ruinous Blast. Exile all non-land permanents that are not legendary. We will draw a card to Rhystic Study. I saw a single white pip there and I thought that it was Swords for a second. A Smothering Tithe. So our opponent can still swing in at us, but doesn't have enough power with the Losheel, unless he can buff it with 1 mana, which I doubt. But the 2 damage does come in at us. Yeah, I'm not sure about that board wipe. I think I would have allowed the vampire player to take me out and then gone for the board wipe the turn after I go down personally. Might be that we see a haste vampire though, because there is red in play of course. Don't often see lightning bolts, but that's always a threat as well. Does Edgar Markov have haste? Oh, it does. First strike and haste, so that could take us out. And does have a haste vampire anyway, because of course he does. So yeah, not surviving this unfortunately. Would have been interesting though, we would have had an interesting another turn. I don't particularly care about winning, I keep saying in games, but if we could have had another turn with the Aerial Extortionist, it would have shown off the deck a little bit further than what we've managed to do here. I, again, can't remember if I've mentioned it, but we did get a better game in with this that showed off the deck a lot more, but there were early scoops, so I'll probably either tack that onto the front of this video, and you've already seen it, or the end of this. So, yeah, we'll see. Olivia swings in at us, you have to assume. Reanimates the Drana. So, yeah, Drana goes into the left. Olivia finishes us off. Weird that we didn't see any of these vampires for the longest time. I'm not sure what our opponent was waiting on, really. But it's panned out well for him, seemingly. Noteworthy that with that board wipe on the Urza's Ruinous Blast, he got into a legendary Olivia and a legendary Drana. So, yeah, I'm not sure that would have helped him anyway, holding on to that. Vampire token chump blocks the commander. So with 3 cards in hand, I think we're to assume that he doesn't have much of anything if he's making attacks like that. Thirsting Bloodlord now just is an Anthem effect for other vampires. So it could be that our opponent goes down here. Does have the Florian in the graveyard still ready to reanimate. Legendary Vampire Tribal would be interesting. Maybe that's what our opponent's gone for? Although this suggests otherwise. Yeah, Legendary Vampire Tribal, then you could include an Urza's Ruinous Blast. That'd be funny. Anyway, it swings in with now a 5-5 and a 4-4. And Olivia will get to reanimate something. Drana does as well, I think. Only has 1 vampire to target though, thanks to the exile previously. So our opponent's got 13 damage on him here. And does decide to gain the 2 life from the Blighted Steppe, so couldn't have reanimated Florian with the Drana because he's targeting non-legendary creatures, so, or she is targeting non-legendary creatures, so yeah, that kind of dampens the idea of it being legendary tribal, but yeah, could have had a plus counter on it if it was reanimated by Drana, but he can't legally do that. So leaving himself at 1, Florian going to exile cards again, and again using that to grab himself a land. So let's see if the white player can wriggle his way out of this. A mere battle sphere is not going to do it. It will draw him a card with his commander, however. But this would have to be something like Vanquish the Horde, something like that, or maybe he's got Teferi's Protection in the list, buy himself another turn. And then swinging in with his commander suggests that this is just a throwaway play here, because he knows that he's going down next turn anyway. Does not block with the Lord and get rid of his commander. Plays an Emergent Zone, so now has access to 4 mana. And no messing around it, straight through to combat. Still nothing to reanimate from these legendary flyers. Okay, but did have the Teferi's Protection. So how much damage can a mere Battle Sphere do? It depends on the number of mere you tap, so it's 4 straight off the bat. But unfortunately it's not likely to get through. Maybe you can make a copy of mere Battle Sphere, but even that'll only be 8. Or 9 I suppose if you copy the actual copy of the Battle Sphere. So it would have to be something like a copy of this and then a Rogue's Passage to get it through for lethal. You never know. Olivia Voldaren. Yeah, that's 1 damage to another creature, not another player thankfully. But could afford to... yeah, he can afford to steal away the mere Battle Sphere if he's worried about that. Swinging in for a load of damage. So the vampire player going off in the late game. Gilded Lotus with 2 cards in hand. 9 mana available. Alright, so just deciding to shoot a mere token instead. You can do that another couple of times. Battle Sphere and Losheel swing. And with the Battle Sphere trigger on the stack, yeah, the vampire player just has answers to everything here. So settle the wreckage, going to exile the creatures and have our opponent Rampant Growth twice. And yeah, that's finally it. I think the mono white player was just playing it out for the fun of it there, but it's going to take too long, might as well just scoop it up. So you've likely seen 2 games with Satya there. Didn't think much of it when I first saw it in spoiler season. I think I had a sour taste in my mouth of energy because I always wanted to be able to play it in Commander, and I don't think it really had the support when that theme first came into Magic the Gathering, as is so often the case. But it is a fun one. I think I'll play this one again soon and hopefully get a better showing with it this time, but we've seen a little bit of what Satya can do in this video, so hopefully you all enjoyed it. Big thank you to the patrons for their support as ever. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.